am 28 years old. The day my sister got married was the day my life fell apart. It was supposed to be a happy day. Everyone said so. The sun was shining. The flowers smelled sweet. Music was playing softly in the background. My sister Bella looked beautiful in her white dress. Her new husband Mark looked nervous but happy. I stood beside her, as her maid of honor, trying my best to smile. But a feeling of dread had been sitting in my stomach all morning. It was a cold, heavy stone that I could not ignore. Bella had been difficult for weeks. She snapped at me for no reason. She made comments about my dress, my hair, everything. I thought it was just wedding stress. I tried to be patient. I told myself it would all be over soon. I wanted her to be happy. I truly did. Even though she and I had never been incredibly close, she was my sister, and this was her big day. The ceremony was lovely. I watched my dad, Robert, walk her down the aisle. He had tears in his eyes. He looked so proud. He loved Bella so much. He loved us both so much. He was the best father anyone could ask for. He raised us by himself after our mother passed away when I was just a baby. He worked 2 jobs to make sure we had everything we needed. He never complained. He was our rock. During the reception, things felt a little better. People were laughing and dancing. The food was delicious. I gave my speech and it went well. I told stories about growing up with Bella. I made people laugh. I saw my dad smiling at me from his table. For a moment, the stone in my stomach felt a little lighter. I thought maybe I had been wrong. Maybe everything was going to be okay. Then, it was time for the father-daughter dance. My dad took Bella's hand, and they swayed to a slow song on the dance floor. They both looked so happy. I felt a lump in my throat watching them. It was a beautiful moment. When the song ended, my dad came over to me. He hugged me tightly. He told me he was proud of me. He told me he loved me. That was when Bella walked over to us. She had a strange smile on her face. It was not a happy smile. It was sharp and cold. She leaned in close, as if to share a secret. The music was loud, so she put her mouth right next to my ear, filled with tears. A single tear tracked a path down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. He just stood there, frozen, as the world celebrated around him. My dad, my strong, unbreakable dad, was crying, and it was my sister who had made him cry. My own heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. I did not understand. What did she mean? My dad was my dad. He had always been my dad. There was no other possibility. This had to be a cruel joke, a horrible, twisted joke meant to ruin this day for me. But the look on my dad's face told me it was not a joke. It was something real, something terrible. I turned to Bella. My voice was shaking when I spoke. What did you say? She just smiled that cold, triumphant smile again. You heard me, she said, her voice light and careless. She then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of dancers, leaving me and my father standing there in the wreckage she had created. The happy music felt like a mockery. The laughter felt like daggers. My world had just tilted on its axis, and I did not know which way was up. I looked at my dad, his face streaked with tears, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I took my dad's arm. He felt like he was trembling. Dad, let's go outside, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. He nodded, not looking at me. He seemed unable to speak. I led him away from the dance floor, past the tables of smiling guests who had no idea what had just happened. We walked through a set of glass doors and out onto a quiet patio. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy reception hall. We stood there in silence for a few moments. The music from inside was a dull thud in the background. My dad leaned against the stone railing, his head bowed. He was still crying, silent tears now. I had never seen him cry like this before, not once in my entire life. It was terrifying. Dad, I started, my voice cracking. What did she mean? What was she talking about? He took a deep, shuddering breath. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He still would not look at me. Chloe, I am so sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I am so. Mom, You and Mom. Your mother, Laura, was the love of my life, he said, his voice growing a little stronger as he talked about her. When I met her, she was already pregnant with you. Your biological father. He was a good man, a soldier. He passed away before you were born. He never even knew she was pregnant. I stared at him, trying to process the information. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. My mother. A man I never knew. A secret kept for 28 years. She was so scared, my dad continued, his voice soft. She was alone. I fell in love with her the moment I saw her, and when she told me about you, I knew I wanted to be your father. I loved you before you were even born, Chloe. I asked her to marry me. I promised her I would raise you as my own, that I would love you and protect you always. He reached out and took my hands. His were warm and steady, just like they always were. The day you were born was the happiest day of my life, he said, looking me straight in the eyes. I was the first one to hold you. I cut your umbilical cord. I signed your birth certificate. In my heart, in every way that matters, I am your father. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. I knew he was telling the truth. I knew he loved me. But the betrayal was still a raw, open wound. Not from him, but from Bella. Why would she do this? Why would she choose her wedding day, a day of celebration, to drop a bomb like this into our lives? Why did you never tell me? I asked, my voice small. We were going to, he said, his voice full of regret. Your mother and I, we talked about it. We wanted to tell you when you were old enough to understand. But then she got sick. And after she was gone, I couldn't. I was afraid of losing you. I was afraid you would think I loved you any less. It was selfish. I know that now. I should have told you years ago. I would never think that, I sobbed, pulling him into a hug. You are my dad. You are the only dad I have ever known. We stood there, clinging to each other, two broken people on a— Her see how much I love you? He shook his head, a look of bitter disappointment on his face. I was a fool. She did not see a story of love. She saw a weapon, and she waited for the perfect moment to use it. The pieces clicked into place. The recent hostility, the comments about money. It was all connected. This was not just a moment of spontaneous cruelty. This was a calculated attack. She had been planning this. She wanted to humiliate me and wound our father in the most public way possible. A cold, hard resolve began to form in my heart, pushing aside the grief and confusion. Bella wanted a war. She had just fired the first shot. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She thought she could break us. She was wrong. All she had done was show me her true colors, and I would make sure everyone else saw them too. I wiped my tears and stood up straight. I looked my dad in the eye. We are not going to let her win, I said, my voice steady and clear. We are not going to let her ruin this. She wants to see us broken. We will not give her the satisfaction. My dad looked at me, a flicker of hope in his tired eyes. What are we going to do? He asked. For now, we go back inside, I said, taking his hand. We are going to hold our heads high. We are going to smile. We are going to act like nothing happened. We will deal with Bella later. Tonight, we show her that she has no power over us. He nodded, squaring his shoulders. He took a deep breath. Together, we walked back into the reception hall. The music was still playing. People were still dancing. Bella was in the center of the dance floor, laughing with her new husband. She glanced over at us as we entered. I saw a flash of surprise in her eyes, followed by disappointment. She had expected us to run home in tears. She had expected to be the victor. I met her gaze across the room and gave her a small, tight smile. It was a promise. This was not over. This was just the beginning. I would find out exactly why she did this, and I would make her regret it for the rest of her life. The stone in my stomach was no longer just dread. It was ice. cold, hard, and ready for a fight. The rest of arms. Then she turned to me. "I'm so glad you could be here for my special day," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I replied, my voice just as sweet. I held her gaze, letting her see the steel in my eyes. "Have a wonderful honeymoon. We have a lot to talk about when you get back." A flicker of fear crossed her face before she masked it with a bright smile. She turned and walked away with her new husband, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. As their car pulled away, a wave of exhaustion hit me. The adrenaline that had been keeping me going was starting to fade, leaving behind a deep, aching pain. My dad and I drove home in silence. The car was filled with unspoken words, with years of secrets and a fresh, gaping wound. When we got to the house I had grown up in, I finally let the tears come. I sat on the sofa and sobbed, for the man I never knew, for the mother I barely remembered, and for the father who had loved me enough to make me his own. My dad sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders, letting me cry it all out. "It's okay, Chloe," he whispered. "It's going to be okay. We're a family. That's all that matters." But was it? Bella had tried to tear that family apart. She had used the most sacred secret we had as a weapon. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was not just about jealousy. It was about something more. The way my dad mentioned her questions about the will, about inheritance, it was about money. Greed was at the heart of her cruelty. The next few days were quiet. My dad and I moved around each other carefully, both of us processing the revelation in our own way. I spent hours looking through old photo albums, searching for a ghost. I looked at pictures of my mother, young and beautiful, her smile so much like mine. I tried to see a hint of another man in my face, but all I saw was her. And I saw my dad, Robert, in every picture with me, from my first birthday to my high school graduation. He was there, beaming with pride, his love for me radiating from every photo. "That makes perfect sense," she said. "Bella has always been obsessed with money, and she has always been jealous of you. Always." "Jealous of what?" I asked. "She was the one who was the real daughter. She had everything. She didn't have the one thing she wanted most," Jenna explained. "She didn't have the same bond with your dad that you do. You and Uncle Robert, you're two peas in a pod. You always have been. Bella was always on the outside of that. She tried to compete with you for his attention, but it was never a competition. He loves you both, but the connection he has with you is different. It's special. She resents that. She always has." I thought back to our childhood. Bella had always been prone to tantrums. She would get angry if I got a better grade or if I was praised for something. I had always dismissed it as typical sibling rivalry. But now looking back, I could see the pattern of resentment Jenna was talking about. "So she finds out this secret," I said, thinking aloud. "And she sees it as her trump card. Proof that she is the rightful heir and I'm just an imposter." "Exactly," Jenna said. "And she used it to try and drive a wedge between you and your dad, hoping he would cut you out. She wanted to isolate you, make you feel like you don't belong. And she wanted to hurt him for loving you so much." The coldness of her logic was chilling. This was not a crime of passion. This was a premeditated attack on our family. "What do I do, Jenna?" I asked, feeling lost. "I want to confront her, but I don't even know where to start. She'll just deny everything or twist it around." "You need leverage," Jenna said, her mind clearly working. "You can't go into a fight with Bella unarmed. She's a snake. You need proof, something that shows everyone what her true motives are." "Proof of what?" I asked. "That she's greedy and cruel? Everyone who knows her already knows that." "No, you need something concrete," Jenna insisted. "Something that proves she was planning this. Something that exposes her lies. We need to dig. We need to find out what she's been up to." A new sense of purpose filled me. Jenna was right. Confronting Bella with just my anger and hurt would be useless. I needed evidence. I needed to build a case against her so that when I finally did confront her, "Don't want you to get hurt, Chloe," he said, his face etched with worry. "I'm already hurt, Dad," I replied gently. "What Bella did, it changed everything. I can't just let it go. I need to know why. And I need to make sure she can never, ever hurt us like this again. I need to do this for me, and for you, and for Mom." He saw the determination in my eyes. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Whatever you need, I'm here. We're in this together." The next day, I went up to the attic. It was dusty and filled with forgotten treasures from our lives. Old toys, boxes of clothes, stacks of books. In the far corner, under a white sheet, was a large wooden trunk. My mom's trunk. I had not opened it in years. I lifted the heavy lid. The smell of cedar and old paper filled the air. Inside, neatly organized, were boxes and folders. It was a time capsule of my mother's life. I pulled out a box labeled "Letters." My heart pounded in my chest. I sat down on the dusty floor and began to read. The letters were from my dad to my mom, written when they were first dating. They were filled with love and hope for their future together. He wrote about me, calling me his little star before I was even born. He talked about his dreams for our family. Reading his words, I felt his love for me reaching across the decades. It was a powerful reminder that he had always been my father, in every way that mattered. Then, I found another bundle of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. These were different. They were from a man named Daniel, my biological father. They were written to my mother from overseas where he was stationed. They were sweet and funny, filled with his love for her and his excitement about coming home. The last letter was dated just a few weeks before I was born. He never made it home. Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. It was like meeting a ghost, a part of me I never knew existed. I felt a strange mix of grief for the father I never had, and immense gratitude for the father I did have. Robert had stepped in and loved me enough for 2 lifetimes. At the bottom of the trunk, I found a large manila envelope. It looked of this destructive path. I kept digging. I went through my mother's old journals. She wrote about her grief over Daniel's death. She wrote about her fear of being a single mother. And she wrote about meeting my dad. She described him as her savior, her rock. She wrote about how he loved me instantly, without hesitation. "He is more of a father to Chloe than Daniel could have ever been," she wrote in one entry, "because he chose her. He chose us. He gave us a family." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul, but they still did not give me the leverage I needed against Bella. I packed up the adoption papers and the letters, determined to keep searching. The truth was in here somewhere. I just had to find it. My search continued for days. I felt like a detective in my own life story. I spoke with my aunt, my mother's sister. I asked her about Daniel, my biological father. She told me he was a wonderful man from a good family. His parents had been devastated by his death, and then by my mother's death just a few years later. "They wanted to be a part of your life," my aunt said sadly. "But your dad, Robert, he was very protective. After your mom died, he wanted to give you a stable, normal life. He thought bringing in another set of grandparents would just confuse you. I think he was also afraid of losing you." "Did they ever try to contact us?" I asked. "They sent letters and gifts for a few years," she recalled, "but eventually they stopped. I think they understood that Robert was doing what he thought was best. They respected his decision. They were good people, Chloe. They would have loved you very much." Another piece of the puzzle, another layer of my hidden history, but still, nothing that I could use against Bella. Bella and Mark were due back from their honeymoon in a few days. Time was running out. I was starting to feel desperate. I decided to take a different approach. Instead of looking into the past, I needed to look into the present. I needed to find out what Bella was doing now. I started with her social media. It was a nauseating parade of perfect honeymoon photos, Bella and Mark smiling on a beach. Bella and Mark toasting with champagne. The captions were full of hashtags like blessed and true love. It made me sick. I dug deeper, going back months. I noticed a change planning, the same firm my dad used to draft his will years ago. My blood ran cold. Why was Bella friends with a paralegal from my dad's lawyer's office? It could be a coincidence, but I did not believe in coincidences anymore. I called Jenna and told her what I had found. "Oh, this is not good," Jenna said. "This is very, very not good. She's been digging into your dad's legal affairs. That's the only explanation." "But how?" I asked. "Those records are confidential. They can't just give them to her." "A friendly paralegal can accidentally leave a file on a desk," Jenna said darkly, "or misplace a document where Bella could see it. If Bella offered her enough money or spun some sob story about wanting to make sure her father's wishes were being honored, it's possible. It's unethical and illegal, but it's possible. We had to find out for sure." Jenna, who was much better at this kind of thing than I was, did some more digging online. She found out that the paralegal had recently posted about a brand new car she had just bought. A car that seemed a little too expensive for a paralegal's salary. "It's circumstantial," Jenna admitted, "but it's highly suspicious. I think Bella paid her for information." "But what information?" I pressed. "My dad told me the will is split 50-50. What else could there be?" "Maybe there's something else," Jenna suggested. "Something besides your dad's will. Something connected to your biological father." Her words sparked a memory. My aunt's comment about Daniel's parents. They sent letters and gifts for a few years. Where were those letters? Where were those gifts? I went back to the attic. I searched the trunk again, more carefully this time. Tucked away at the very bottom, beneath a false floor I had never noticed before, was a small, locked metal box. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I could feel it. I had to break the lock with a hammer. Inside, there was a thick stack of documents and a series of bank statements. There were more letters from Daniel's parents, my biological grandparents. They wrote to my dad every year on my birthday. They expressed their gratitude to him for me. But then I read the last letter from my grandparents. They had specifically asked him not to tell me about the trust until I was 30. They wanted me to make my own way in the world, to build my own life without the influence of that kind of wealth. They wanted to be sure I would be responsible with it. My dad was not hiding it from me. He was honoring their wishes. He was protecting me, just as he always had. And then it all became crystal clear. This was what Bella was after. She had somehow found out about the trust. She must have paid that paralegal to dig into my background, to find anything she could use. And she found the jackpot. She found out about my biological father, and she found out about the money. Her plan was suddenly obvious. It was a two-pronged attack. First, she would use the secret of my paternity to emotionally destabilize me and my father. She would try to drive a wedge between us, to make me feel like I was not a real part of the family. Second, she would use that emotional turmoil to challenge my claim to the trust. She would argue that I was not the rightful heir. She would try to paint me as a fraud, an outsider who was trying to steal money from a family I did not belong to. She probably thought she could convince our dad, in his grief and confusion, to give her control of the trust. Or worse, she could try to legally challenge it, claiming that I was not the intended beneficiary. The sheer evil of her plan took my breath away. She was willing to destroy our family, to break our father's heart, all for money. I sat there in the dusty attic, surrounded by the ghosts of my past, holding the proof of Bella's treachery in my hands. The adoption papers, the letters from my biological grandparents, the trust documents. I had everything I needed. I was no longer just sad or hurt. I was furious. A cold, calculating anger settled deep in my bones. Bella wanted a war. Now, she was going to get one. And I was going to win. I would not just defend myself. I would go on the offensive. I would expose her for the greedy, manipulative monster she truly was. And I would do it in a way she would never forget. Bella and Mark returned from their honeymoon a few days later. As expected, she immediately started her campaign. She called my dad, crying, saying she was so worried about him. She said she had been thinking not tell Bella was that he had also invited Jenna and me. Bella readily agreed. She thought she had him right where she wanted him. She thought he was vulnerable, that she could manipulate him into giving her what she wanted. She had no idea she was walking into a trap. The days leading up to the dinner were tense. I went over my plan with my dad and Jenna a dozen times. I gathered all my evidence, the adoption papers, the letters, the trust documents. I made copies of everything. I was nervous, but I was also filled with a strange sense of calm. I knew what I had to do. I was ready. On the night of the dinner, I felt a familiar cold stone in my stomach. But this time, it was not dread. It was determination. I was dressed simply, but I stood tall. I was not the confused, heartbroken girl from the wedding anymore. I was a woman ready to fight for her family. Bella and Mark arrived, all smiles and fake concern. Bella hugged my dad, telling him how good it was to see him. She completely ignored me. She was already playing her part, positioning me as the outsider. Our aunt and Jenna arrived a few minutes later. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. We all sat down at the dining room table. My dad had cooked a simple meal, but no one seemed very hungry. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, Bella decided to make her move. She cleared her throat and adopted a serious, somber tone. "I know this is difficult," she began, looking at my dad with her big, sorrowful eyes. "And the last thing I want to do is cause more pain. But after the revelation at the wedding, I think we need to be practical. We need to talk about the future." "What about the future, Bella?" my dad asked, his voice steady. "Well, Dad, it's about your estate," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "About making sure your legacy is protected. You've worked so hard your whole life. I just want to make sure that what you've built goes to your real family, to your blood." She glanced at me, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. This was her opening salvo, the direct attack. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. I did not say a word. I just waited. "What are you suggesting, Bella?" my aunt asked, her voice sharp. "I'm suggesting that the will needs—" "It's not about money," Bella insisted, her voice rising. "It's about principle. It's about what's right. I am your daughter. She is a stranger you took in. Why should she be treated the same as me?" This was my moment. I calmly placed a folder on the table in front of me. I opened it. "A stranger?" I said, my voice quiet but clear. Every eye at the table turned to me. "Is that what I am, Bella?" I slid a document across the table to her. It was a copy of my adoption certificate. "This is a legal document from when I was 1 year old," I said. "It says that Robert legally adopted me. It says that, in the eyes of the law, I am his daughter, just as much as you are." Bella stared at the paper, her face paling slightly. This was not part of her plan. She had not expected me to have proof. "That's just a piece of paper," she stammered, trying to recover. "It doesn't change the fact that you don't share his blood. It doesn't make you a real part of this family." "A real part of the family?" I repeated, my voice growing stronger. "I have been here my whole life. I was here for every birthday, every holiday. I was here when Mom got sick. I was here when she died. I was here to help Dad pick up the pieces. Where were you, Bella? Oh, that's right. You were at college, too busy to come home. You were traveling the world, living your life. This family has always been here for you when you needed it, but you have never been here for us." The color drained from her face. My aunt and Jenna were staring at her, their expressions hard as stone. "That's not true," Bella cried, her voice getting shrill. "I love this family." "No, you don't," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, even tone. "You love what this family can give you." Which brings me to the real reason we're here tonight. This isn't about the will, is it, Bella? This is about something else. This is about a trust fund. The silence in the room was deafening. Bella's eyes widened in genuine shock. She looked like a cornered animal. She had no idea I knew. I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling. "Oh, I think you do," I said. I slid another set of, "Could try to get your greedy hands on my inheritance." Bella was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked at her husband, who was staring at her with a look of horror. He had clearly been in on the plan, but he had not expected this level of exposure. "You did this," my dad said, his voice low and full of a cold fury I had never heard before. "You paid someone to investigate your own family. You unearthed a secret that your mother and I kept to protect Chloe, and you used it as a weapon. You stood up at your own wedding, a day that was supposed to be about love and family, and you tried to destroy your sister and me, all for money." "Dad, It wasn't like that," Bella sobbed, the tears finally coming. But they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of a spoiled child who had just been caught. "Don't you dare lie to me," my dad roared, slamming his hand on the table. The dishes rattled. Everyone jumped. "I have never in my life been so ashamed of you. You are not the daughter I raised. The daughter I raised was taught about love and loyalty and family. You seem to have forgotten all of those lessons." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Get out of my house," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Dad, please," Bella begged, reaching for him. "I said get out," he yelled. "You and your pathetic husband. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you. I don't want to speak to you. As far as I am concerned, you are no longer a part of this family." Bella stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief. This was the ultimate consequence, the one thing she had never imagined. She had tried to cast me out, but in the end, she was the one being exiled. Mark, looking terrified, quickly stood up and pulled Bella to her feet. "Come on, Bella," he muttered. "Let's just go." She let him lead her to the door, her whole body trembling. At the doorway, she turned back for one last, desperate appeal. Her eyes met mine. They were filled with a toxic mix of hatred and defeat. I just looked at her, my face calm and unmoving. I had won. I had not just defended myself, I had exposed her for who she was. "So sorry, Dad," I said. "Don't you be sorry," he said, his voice thick. "You did nothing wrong. You were brave. You were strong. You are everything I could ever want in a daughter." He held me tight, and for the first time since that horrible night at the wedding, I felt the cold stone in my stomach finally begin to melt away. The war was over, and my family, the real family, the one built on love and choice, was still standing. We were wounded, but we were whole. The aftermath of that dinner was quiet but decisive. Bella tried to reach out a few times. She sent long, rambling text messages to my dad, full of excuses and blame. She blamed Mark. She blamed the stress of the wedding. She even tried to blame me, saying I had provoked her. My dad did not reply. He blocked her number. He was done. A week later, a letter arrived from a lawyer. Bella was officially contesting the will, and she was making a claim against my trust fund, alleging that my dad had unduly influenced my biological grandparents. It was a desperate, pathetic move. My dad and I met with our own lawyer. We showed him all the evidence, the adoption papers, the letters from my grandparents, which clearly stated their wishes and their deep gratitude and respect for my dad. Our lawyer laughed. "She doesn't have a case," he said, shaking his head. "This is a frivolous lawsuit. She's just trying to harass you. We'll have it thrown out of court so fast her head will spin." And he was right. A few weeks later, the case was dismissed. The judge was not impressed with Bella's claims. He even ordered her to pay our legal fees. It was another humiliating defeat for her. The news of what had happened spread through our extended family. My aunt and Jenna made sure everyone knew the true story. They told them about Bella's greed, her manipulation, and her cruelty. The family, which had initially been confused and divided, quickly rallied around me and my dad. People called to offer their support. They sent cards, they stopped by with food. The message was clear. We were their family, and Bella was on the outside.
I saw Mark, Bella's husband, at the grocery store one day. He tried to avoid me, but I walked right up to him. "I hope it was worth it," I said.
The fire of Bella's betrayal. We talked more openly than ever before. He told me more stories about my mom and about the man who was my biological father. He gave me the letters from my grandparents, and I read them all, feeling a connection to a family I never knew I had. One evening, my dad and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like?" I asked him quietly. "If Daniel had lived? If you had never met my mom?" He was silent for a long time, thinking. "I try not to," he said finally, "because if things had been different, I wouldn't have you. And I can't imagine a life without you, Chloe. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Tears welled in my eyes. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me too, Dad," I said. A year passed. Then another. I turned 30. On my birthday, my dad and I went to the bank with our lawyer. The trust fund was officially transferred to my name. It was a surreal experience. The numbers on the screen did not seem real. But it was not the money that mattered. It was what it represented. It was a final gift from a family I never got to meet. It was a legacy of love, and it was the final, definitive proof that Bella had lost. I used some of the money to buy a small house in a nearby town. I used some to set up a college fund for Jenna's kids. I invested the rest, determined to be the responsible person my grandparents had hoped I would be. I never saw Bella again. I heard she and Mark divorced. She moved out of state, cutting off all ties with the family. She had gotten what she deserved. She was alone, with nothing but the money she had married into and the bitter knowledge that she had destroyed her own family for nothing. Sometimes, I think about that day at the wedding. That horrible whisper that turned my world upside down. It was meant to destroy me. It was meant to break my spirit and tear my family apart. But it did not. In the end, it made me stronger. It revealed the truth, not just about my past, but about the people around me. It showed me what family really means. It is not about blood. It is not about biology. It is about love. It is about choice. My dad chose me. He chose to be my father every single day for 20